Time for our international media review. Aaron and I are showing you some of the headlines from around the world. And a very controversial issue is what China is doing at the moment in the South China Sea. The international New York Times reporting that it's building a military airstrip on one island in these contested waters. It's vastly expanding its sphere of influence by doing this, the paper says.
Yeah. Well, the Moscow Times reports on President Putin's annual phone-in with the Russian public. The paper says domestic concerns dominated that event.
The Guardian has a picture of last night's British party leaders' debate hosted by the BBC. Prime Minister David Cameron, though, refusing to make an appearance. It was about the opposition last night.
Thousands have marched against attacks on foreigners in South Africa. That's amid a wave of anti-immigrant violence. That's in the Wall Street Journal.
The FT reports that two of Wall Street's biggest banks have posted some of their strongest quarterly results since the financial crisis. Mark Davies is here. Mark is CEO of the strategy consultancy at Camberton. Good morning, Mark.
Morning, Mark. Morning.
The first thing that I thought when I saw this story about not only China's military expansion in the South China Sea, but actually developing complete islands from nothing, was actually their control over territorial waters. The international law of the sea gives a country, I think, something like 200 miles from its border into the sea. Yeah. This is in the International New York Times.
Well, this is a reef that they're building a runway on. And it's got 5 names, this reef. It's being talked about in the International New York Times as Fiery Cross Reef, because that's what the Americans know it as. But the Chinese know it as something different, the Philippines know it as something different. They all lay claim to it. And the fact that the Chinese are building a runway on it is exerting their authority in the area. And it's a major strategic thing, because obviously if you don't have air control, then you can't have control of the sea. So they're putting a runway there so they can have the air control.
Is this is this a game changer?
I don't think it's a game changer, because it was expected that they would be, they're flexing their muscles. So I don't think it's a complete game changer, but I think it is definitely them, saying we're in charge here, and the Philippines won't like it, and the Americans, as a knock-on from that, won't like it either.
Yes, that's right. They're a
it's a big strategic issue, but I don't think it's
especially if they say that in time they could, place missile, not only radar, but possibly missile launchers, which could threaten that entire region.
But I mean, they could do that on the mainland and still probably take control over the area. But the fact that everyone lays claim to this particular reef, they're now saying no, it's ours. We're building on it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's turn to the Moscow Times. Mr. Putin's how many was there? That was like he had something like 1 million. Obviously, he couldn't do them all.
No, there were 3 million calls. There were 3 million questions that were placed.
Right. Yeah.
And he answered 74 of them over the course of 4 hours. But actually, that's the interesting point, because this isn't the same as we have phone-ins here in this country, where the deputy prime minister does a phone-in, as you know, every week. But when he takes questions over the radio, he doesn't know what they're going to be.
Right. Yeah.
But this is a state-run programme where 3 million questions were submitted.
There was a gatekeeper.
And 74 were taken. So it's very hard to know as a result whether this was genuine democracy or just a PR stunt. Because although there were mainly questions on the economy, and this is what the Moscow Times leads on, the fact that it was about domestic issues and not about the Ukraine and Crimea to the extent that it was when this happened last year, we all know that politicians can answer questions on the economy, particularly if they're teed up for them to hit out of the park. And given that only 74 questions were taken out of that 3 million, you think to yourself, okay, probably put in such a way that they enabled Putin to say exactly what he wanted to say.
They'll think, well, you tell me from the economic point of view that surely he can't deny the reality of what people are living through. I have seen photographs that have appeared in the Moscow Times of shelves in supermarkets in Moscow which are either very empty or completely empty. There was one, I don't speak Russian, but the translation said, this is the cheese shelf.
Yeah.
There was nothing on it. Nothing.
We know, the Russian economy, right, is an absolute shambles. The ruble, which is the bottom has fallen out, they call it the rubble, I think, don't they? Huge issues. And in fact, I think yesterday he said that, he expects the Russian economy to grow in 1 to 2 years.
Well, he talked about the fact that they should take sanctions and turn them to their advantage. Exactly how he's going to do that, I don't know. But he was out there talking to his domestic audience, so he can say what the hell he wants.
Can I give you a very good example of how it has helped?
Yeah.
One manufacturer of meat products, it makes Cherkizovo, I think it's called, again in the Moscow Times, this was a few weeks ago. It makes 800,000 tons of meat products a year. Its profits in the last 3 years of last month, Putin introduced sanctions against Western food in August. their profits.
In 3 months, you were talking about.
In the last 3 months of last year,
last
went
year,
up 195% compared to the same period in the year before.
There you go. Wow, nice work.
Did you watch this?
Look at you.
I did watch this.
Guardian.
And David Cameron will be hit for the fact that he wasn't there. But actually, I think he'll be quite glad that he wasn't there. Not least because Nicola Sturgeon, I think, was once again the dominant player. And I think Ed Miliband will come away from it thinking, look, the reason I'm going to lose this election is because I'm not getting any votes in Scotland. And that's not going to have changed for the better from his perspective yesterday. I thought Sturgeon owned him on a number of issues. And, I'm surprised that The Guardian have led by talking about Farage having a go at the BBC, which he did for one moment. He said that he thought that the audience was terribly left-wing. But actually, what was important in this debate was the Miliband-Sturgeon interaction and how people will have viewed that.
Yeah, definitely. Shall we move on? The Wall Street Journal, South Africa, which is also, in terms of economics, having a really tough time. I guess the last thing, in terms of wanting to attract foreign investment, foreign business, is to have these anti-foreign sort of attacks and marches.
Yeah, this is about a march saying that we shouldn't have attacks on foreigners and immigrants. And of course, whenever there's an attack of that sort, as again we see in this country, it tends to be all about economics and about people feeling disenfranchised. In South Africa, they changed the rules for immigration, or at least the applications for immigration, 5 years ago. They centralised it. So people within the regions felt that they became more and more detached from the decision-making process. And when you ally that to economic issues, which obviously are rife in Southern Africa as a whole and in South Africa, you're going to get people pointing the finger at the obvious people to point it to, and that is always the immigrants.
Yeah.
And so as a result of that, you've had some quite inflammatory language from various people. Zulu King talked about dealing with our own lice and said to immigrants they should pack up and go home, and that's led to violence. And what we're seeing here on the front page of the Wall Street Journal is a march from people saying enough. We need to call a halt to that.
Yeah.
Aaron, over to you.
Yeah, you can do it. It's quite easy.
No, please. It's business.
The banks,
It's your
the
job.
banks in the
You're
US,
paid.
Goldman and am I?
Yeah.
Goldman, not as much as these banks get. Let me tell you, Goldman and Citi are sort of rubbing their hands together, huh? The money came in.
They've had their best quarters for some time. In the case of Goldman Sachs, they've had their best quarter for 18 quarters. In the case of Citibank, the best for 7 years. I think what's important here is that there has been a debate as to whether the problems the banks have been having have been cyclical or structural.
Yeah.
And Goldman's have been saying that they are cyclical, and the fact that things have come back significantly suggests that they're right. This has been driven by trading rather than by M&A.
Right.
M&A is up about 7%, whereas trading is up 23%. But it's whether it's cyclical or structural that matters.
Okay, finally, this wasn't in our preview of what we were going to talk about, but Mark, we have a surprise for you because we want to share this with the viewers. It's been retweeted thousands of times around the world. Let's show you the pictures.
Here we go.
This is
Roll them. Okay, this is Billy Morgan. He's a snowboarder from Southampton. That move there is called an 1800-degree quadruple cork. It is, in other words, what's he doing?
He's spinning around. 5
times.
How many times 5? Look at that.
Four. Quadruple.
No, they said 5. Sorry, when I was shown this, can we run again? Count them. I was told 5.
Have you ever been snowboarding, Mark?
4.
I've never snowboarded.
Thank you. The floor director saying
you're
5.
a secret
The floor
The
director.
guest wants to talk, please.
Sorry, man.
Mark.
I can see you're a secret snowboarding addict.
never
I
been.
can see you out there trying this. I'm afraid that I wouldn't get anywhere near it. I thought I was doing even one. I couldn't even begin to do one, let alone to do as many as that.
The point is, it's the first time it's ever been done
Really?
before. And
It's
for him
amazing.
to actually make the landing as
Yeah.
well, because usually you'd expect him to spill onto the ground or whatever the technical term for not doing a perfect landing.
Spill onto the ground.
Yeah.
That's how I would. That's how probably all three.
Splat.
Splat.
Mark, thank you
Good
very
on you,
much
Mark.
indeed.
Thank
It's
you,
Friday, so have a lovely weekend.
And you.
Aaron and I will be back in a few minutes. More news and business to give you.
Yeah.
For the moment, thank you very much, and we'll continue to monitor what's happening with the migrant situation, the crisis that is now enveloping the EU with the migrants crossing from Africa. Bye-bye.